Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 1 of Saturday Tek Tak. This is just a little discussion about how to effectively use your wireless network, your computer, your applications, services, whatever you need, and to get the most out of it. Today's episode, we're going to be featuring how to set up your wireless network for best use for online gaming, applications such as Skype, anything that requires a lot of network traffic. Our topics for this will be wireless setup, LAN setup, quality of service, port forwarding, and UPnP. So I'm just going to pause this real quick and we'll get started. And we are back. Now the first tab we're going to go to is our wireless tab. Now, if your router does not have a menu like this, it should have a menu that is similar to this, and it should have similar options within these menus and tabs. For the first part, we are going to be going over 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz wireless networks. For your best experience, it would be best to use a 5 gigahertz network. That's because 5 gigahertz network is faster. It can be significantly faster, and because it's faster, it should lower your latency and your lag. Now for your channel should be selected on auto. Usually that's what your router is automatically configured for. However, for my 5 gigahertz channel, I do not have auto. Instead, I have to manually select one. Now the thing about channels is that channels can get congested with a lot of traffic. If you select auto, your router should automatically connect to a channel that is not being used or is being used the least. If not, then you might have to manually set it. Now, how do you know which channel to pick? How do you know which channel is not being used the most? Well, there are several softwares available on the internet that you can download that will, how could I say this? It will monitor the wireless activity around your area, and it will tell you which channel is being used the least. I have an application on my phone that actually does this for me right off my phone. It gives me what channels are being used the least, what channels are being used the most. It gives me detailed information about my wireless signal, with the wireless strength, things like that. So that's definitely something to look into. If you're using 2.4 gigahertz and you don't feel like downloading a program like that, then I would probably suggest picking auto. If not, if you're using 5 gigahertz, and if you don't have an auto option for 5 gigahertz, I suggest you just pick a random channel and go for it. That's if you don't want to download the software. Otherwise, download a software and check it out. Next is we have mode. You probably want to select the highest mode you can, just because if you have multiple people on your wireless network, this will allow a lot of wiggle room for data, which is always a good thing. You shouldn't need to worry about the lower ones unless you have old equipment, because some old equipment might not support the higher speeds, and if you choose the higher speeds, you might not be able to use the older equipment like they should be able to be used. That's completely up to you, and that would just have to be a test you'll have to conduct yourselves. Alright, our next topic is LAN setup. For the LAN setup, the only part we're going to be talking about is IP reservation, or address reservation, I should say. IP reservation, address reservation, whatever you want to call it, is great if you're port forwarding things. When you port forward something, you open up a port on your computer. They'll allow, a port on your router and port on your computer to allow things to interact with your computer. Now, with a lot of multiplayer games, you have to have certain ports open in order to allow that server that you're on to communicate with your computer, and for that computer to communicate with that server. If these ports are not open, you will not be able to use that game, multiplayer, whatever. Even Skype. Skype has its own port that it uses. And the problem with having port forwarding without IP reservation or static IPing is that if your device goes offline, or if your router goes offline, there's a chance that you may get a different IP address. Because port forwarding, what that does is it you select a port for a certain computer on your network, a certain IP address. With IP reservation, you don't have to worry about that, because no matter how long your device was away from the network, or how long your device or your router was off, if you have it set for IP address reservation, it will allow you to save that address, and then every time that device gets back on the network, it will get that IP address every single time. This is a bigger advantage over static IP, as you don't have to manually configure a static IP address. And even with static IP addressing, if you have a DHCP server enabled on your router, you may get IP conflicts. That's because a DHCP server may issue a computer or device a certain IP address, and if you have another device with a static IP address and you go to try to connect to the network, you will get a conflict. Two devices will have the same IP address. That's not a good thing. Well, the good thing is that address reservation solves that. So I would suggest using this if you do port forwarding. It's pretty simple to use. Just go here. I put in the IP address, the MAC address, and the device name. Device name should not really matter. I should only look at the MAC address because the MAC address is the most important thing when it comes to home networking besides IP addresses. Alright, our next topic, quality of service. Quality of service, you probably want to keep this on, the Wi-Fi multimedia settings. That allows for certain things to go on your network, and I'm sure games use this. My quality of service is off right now, but if you turn this on, this entire thing down here will get set up. Keep your bandwidth control off, because why would you want to control or limit your bandwidth? You want the most you can get. Setting up a QoS, or quality of service rule. And as you can see here, I have several things that has the highest priority on my network. I have Skype, IP phones, Google Talk, Netgear EVA. Those are the highest ones. So what does this mean? Let's pretend you have a family member that is on Skype with another person and you're on your game. When they're on Skype, they have the highest priority if you have this enabled. Now, if they have the highest priority, that means you may experience some lag or latency. That is because they are taking up most of your network traffic. They are given priority on your network. You can change that by going to your router settings and changing your priorities. It is my suggestion that you lower everything else to at the most high or medium, and then for your specific gaming ports and services, you make them highest. So that way your gaming, and say if you do use Skype, just keep Skype the highest. You know, whatever program you're running and whatever ports they use, have them the highest. Keep everything else that you don't use low. So adding a priority rule is pretty simple, at least for this router. Just go here. You just can make up a name, whatever you want. Whoops. It gives me categories, applications, online gaming, Ethernet LAN port, MAC address, blah, blah, blah. Applications, these are default applications. We don't have to worry about that. And here's the priority. So if I had Battlefield 4, let's say, I would put it as the highest, put Battlefield 4. And then I would put the port that Battlefield 4 uses. I don't know what it is on the top of my head because I don't play it, but that's what I would use. Alright, our next agenda and the final thing is UPnP. That should be under Advanced Setup. And here we go. UPnP. UPnP, what that basically does, it will automatically open a port on your network if an application requests it to do so. This can make things a lot simpler. That means you don't have to worry about port forwarding. You don't have to worry about IP address reservation. You don't have to worry about any of that. The problem is that computers and electronics, they are not perfect. They screw up all the time. I'm sure you all can agree with that. I'm sure your phones, they probably piss you off all the time. I know mine does sometimes when it does something I don't want it to do. You know, things don't always work like they should. So if you're having a problem with accessing a multiplayer server, if you're having a problem with Skype, anything like that, you might want to turn UPN off or just keep it on and then just assign a port anyway. And assigning a port is pretty simple. If I go to port forwarding is pretty straightforward. I can add a custom service. This might be a little bit different depending on your router, but I can type in the name for the service. I can pick what service type it is. Your best bet's probably TCP/UDP because it should do both. You type in the port, The starting and ending is usually the same. It might be a little bit different, depends what you're using. Same thing for the internal port. The internal, I'm not completely sure, but that might automatically make an exception in your firewall. Don't quote me on that, I'm just saying it might. And then you just put in the IP address of your device. And my Chromecast is 1.3 and my PC is 1.6. So if I have address reservation on to keep my computer at 192.168.1.6, then I will port forward to this address. And then whenever my computer, if this gets disconnected or whatever, my IP address will never change, and then I will never have to worry about changing my port forwarding. Because if the IP address of my computer or device gets changed, I will have to change the IP address of the port. That can be a pain in the butt. So it is my suggestion that you use IP reservation if you use port forwarding. If you're just sticking with UPnP, you don't have to worry about any of this. That's what the great thing about UPnP is. However, like I said, computer's not perfect. If you're having problems, the best troubleshooting thing to start with is probably your port forwarding. That is, on networking standards. Well, that's all I got time for today. Thanks for watching. Just let me know if you have a question or if you want me to cover a certain topic, and I will cover it. I hope you all have a good day. Goodbye.